Hey everyone, welcome back to Animated Christianity. I know that this is a little different. I got the little avatar, but I am not feeling good at all this week. My wife gave me her cold, so I figured the avatar might be better than seeing me with a runny nose and, my open mouth breathing. That's also probably why I don't sound the greatest. But as I said, this is Animated Christianity, where faith meets fandom and the Bible and anime collide. Today's topic is going to challenge the status quo and maybe ruffle a few feathers. So buckle up and hold on, because today, right before the election, we are talking about leadership. Today we're going to be diving into My Hero Academia again, but we're taking a closer look at Season 1, Episode 9. It's titled, Do Your Best, Iida. And we're going to connect it to a story in the Bible. It's found in Samuel, chapters 8 through 12. So, Do Your Best, Iida starts out with this huge gathering of reporters and media personnel outside of UA High School. The news is that the popular hero All Might was a teacher and has caused quite a commotion. After dismissing the media, 1A's homeroom teacher, Mr. Aizawa, explains to the students that they need to elect a class rep. As soon as Aizawa announces this, every student is quick to volunteer. Deku, the central character, begins to make sense of the chaos. You see, in a normal class, students might just take on various extra duties, but in the hero course, it actually allows a student to gain experience in leading a group. That experience lends itself very well to a career as a hero, especially if they're going to go on and found various agencies. Now, Tenya Iida actually interrupts his classmates as they each try to nominate themselves for the position with some hard-hitting truth. He actually explains to the class that any position of leadership is not just a job for anyone who wants to do it. A position of leadership requires a calling and the trust of those around the leader. It's actually a big responsibility for the person in charge. Iida then suggests a democratic election, kind of like the one we've got coming up. Now, the election produces some interesting results. With 3 votes, the class rep actually ends up being none other than our timid Izuku Midoriya. The calm and calculating Yayurozo comes in second and is selected as deputy class rep. Now, Midoriya is obviously uncomfortable with the results. He didn't expect to win. He's nervous and shaking, and it's obvious that he's not sure what he's doing. It's possible that it was, in fact, this humility that promoted the other class members to vote for him. After the election, while the students are having lunch, a crisis ends up happening. A group of media personnel and reporters that were outside earlier that day ended up getting past the school's defenses and trigger an alarm. The students of UA end up going into a panic. We actually end up seeing Iida step up and promote order, oddly enough by crashing into the wall above an exit sign. And once class actually resumes after lunch, Midoriya gets up in front of the class and he steps down from the class rep position. He actually suggests Iida for his replacement due to his quick thinking and demonstrated leadership skills. The rest of the students agree, and Tenya Iida is given the position of class rep and the moniker Emergency Exit Iida. After that, the students go to the USJ Rescue Training Ground and meet real villains for the first time. But that is a topic for another discussion. Now, let's shift gears and look at some comparable chapters from the Bible. Again, the topic of our study is 1 Samuel chapters 8 through 12. You can take the time to read it if you'd like, but I'm also going to provide a detailed summary. In these chapters, we read that the Israelites are demanding a king from God's prophet, the man of God, Samuel. We see in the previous chapters that Samuel has been a very trustworthy and upright leader in Israel, but he started to get old, and he's actually given some of his responsibilities to his sons. Yet his sons have accepted bribes and they've taken from the people. So now the people are demanding a king. Samuel receives a word from God explaining that by demanding a king, the Israelites are actually rejecting God's rule over them. God then instructs Samuel to go ahead and do as they ask. He will provide a king that will deal with the people persecuting Israel. Yet, he also instructs Samuel to warn these people about the consequences of having an actual monarch, such as the king would take their sons for his army, their daughters for his service, and the best of their fields and produce for his officials. Yet, despite all of this, the Israelites still insist on having that monarch. We are then introduced to a young man from the tribe of Benjamin named Saul, whose path ends up crossing with Samuel as he's looking for some of his father's sheep. Upon their meeting, God instructs Samuel that Saul is the one he has chosen to be the king of Israel. Samuel then invites Saul to dinner and to rest at his home because it was late. In the morning, Samuel speaks with Saul privately. He tells Saul, God has chosen you to be king. Samuel then explains to Saul exactly what is going to happen to him during the day. Without being prompted, he actually answers Saul's concern about his father's sheep and then tells him, wait for 7 days. A week later, at a public meeting of all the people of Israel, Saul is chosen publicly by lot. He is seen to be strong and charismatic. Ultimately, he is accepted by most of the people. There are some holdouts. Yet Saul then ends up going on to prove his leadership by taking action against an attack from the Ammonites, and he ends up defeating them. This secures his position. Finally, having appointed the Israelites their king, Samuel delivers his farewell speech. He makes a sacrifice to God and explains how the incoming storm, because there was a storm brewing at that time, was a sign from God. He finishes his farewell by reminding the people of God's faithfulness, and their duty is to obey him. He says, be sure to fear the Lord and faithfully serve him. Think of all the wonderful things he has done for you. Yet, if you continue to sin, both you and your king will be swept away. Now, there are some important parallels that we can see here, and they provide us with a few intriguing lessons. Though Iida didn't originally get picked, it was his quick thinking in the face of crisis that caused Deku to choose him for the position. While Saul did actually see acceptance because of his charisma, it was in fact his actions that cemented him as king in the hearts of the people. This shows us that leadership often starts with action. But here's the twist. Even though they step up in their story, both characters actually fail and fall into struggle. If you go on to read more of Saul's story, you can see that Saul's pride actually ends up leading him to make decisions that defy God over the next few chapters. It actually ends up leading to his downfall, where he becomes jealous of David and ultimately gets him unalived. Then, later on in our anime, Iida faces his own struggles in humility when he swears vengeance on the hero killer Stained for paralyzing his brother. He ends up disregarding the advice of his work-study teacher and actually almost gets himself unalived, and would have if Deku and Todoroki didn't arrive in time to save him. You see, the sin that is presented in the context of our biblical passage is the rejection of God's leadership. It was plainly addressed at the beginning of the study. The Israelites had rejected God's leadership over them and instead wanted a strong leader. But the only problem with that is, as both of our stories teach us, it's not an individual's power, ability, intellect, or even charisma that makes them strong. Proverbs chapter 1, Solomon's wise sayings, states plainly, "The fear of the Lord is the foundation of all knowledge. It is a fool who despises wisdom and correction." Now, in both of our examples of Emergency Exit Iida and King Saul, while they initially proved themselves to be capable leaders, there came a point where they ended up relying on their own understanding instead of God's, and this proved to be their downfall. At least Emergency Exit Iida gets a redemption arc. Saul, however, continues down the path of self-reliance and finally ends up falling on his own sword when he was defeated by the Philistines. Now, isn't it interesting that Christ is recorded both in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke saying, "You will know a person by their fruits." Throughout Scripture, we are told many times to use discernment. In the letters of Paul, the parables of Christ, the Proverbs of Solomon, we are warned about men who rely solely on their own wisdom and understanding. There is a turn of phrase that says absolute power corrupts absolutely. So therefore, it makes sense. The number one quality for a leader, especially the leader of the most powerful country in the world, should be their acknowledgement and understanding of a power and standard that is higher than themselves. Now, this power can't just be a worldly power that can destroy the body. It needs to be a power that can destroy both body and soul. A power that can enact judgment, even beyond death. After all, some of the most heinous men in history have followed a path that leads to destruction, sometimes, like Saul, even by their own hand. So, to tie all of these things together, and to answer the looming question of how do we apply this in our daily lives, it is imperative to look at our modern political climate. In the US, with the upcoming election, people are more divided than ever before. There's actually a certain rapper on YouTube, you may know him, you may not, who released a song that presents the perfect picture. People are screaming hate at one another and blaming the opposing side for all of their problems. And both sides are crying out for a leader that will deliver them from their enemies. Just like the Israelites found out, charismatic leader that seems to do a few good things may not be all that he or she appears to be. We must first rely and trust in God for guidance. We, as professing Christians, should also remember that we do not serve elephants or donkeys, but the Holy Lamb of God. We cannot take the path of the Israelites and hope for a leader that will solve all of our problems. This requires sacrifice, hard work, and most importantly, it requires humility. As C.S. Lewis pointed out in his book Mere Christianity, pride is a spiritual cancer. It eats up the very possibility of love or contentment or even common sense. So, what do you think makes a strong leader? Let's talk about it in the comments. Also, if you'd like to support me further, you can join me on my Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/DonnieDreams. You can also join my Ko-fi, which will be in the description below. Thank you all for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this content, if it's blessed you in some way, be sure to share, like, subscribe. Again, I apologize for the avatar, but I think the avatar looks better than I do right now. And make sure to hit that notification bell for more animated Christianity, where anime and faith collide. Until next time, this is Donnie Dreams saying, God bless. Over and out. One more thing real quick. If you managed to make it this far, next week we are going to be raising money for Wounded Warrior Project. It is a charity that helps disabled American veterans find comfort, community, care, jobs, and much, much more. As a charity that is very close to my heart, considering the fact that while I may not be a veteran, there are many people in my family who were. These are the people that fight for our freedom, and we should let them know that we do care for them. If you'd like to contribute to that cause, then you can find the link in the description below, or there should be a QR code on the screen. Thank you, and have a blessed day.